Data Storytellers. Today on the show, I have with me Vivek Patel. Vivek and I met at CDO Calgary, and he brought a really cool angle to the conversation. I immediately approached him during lunch break to invite him for a podcast, and he graciously accepted. So I look forward to this conversation. Vivek, welcome on the show.
Thank you.
So just a quick introduction into what you do. Most of the people who are listening probably haven't heard of you. So what is your current job title? What company do you work for? And what is your role?
Yeah, so I am our global head of data and analytics at the Ampere Computing. Ampere's a fabless semiconductor. We build CPUs, so server CPUs, right? So we think of data centers and processors that go into data centers. And where we really differentiate is we build it for ARM, right? So it's a disruptive organization, and it jives with me because I'm very much try to disrupt wherever I go and be truculent as I go, as most of us in the data community are. And so my day-to-day is managing our platforms, our data engineering, data science, analytics teams, data governance teams, managing infrastructure, managing our strategy, managing our learning and development, etc. So yeah, I'm extremely happy to be here.
Well, we will get into some of your best practices of disruption, I'm sure. Now, on that note, so I like to ask this question sometimes. Over the past 20 years, a lot changed when it comes to data analytics, also in general, like how businesses conduct themselves and how they try to force some competitive advantage in different areas. How do you see the data analytics segment, this whole industry change over the past 10 to 15 years? How do you see the challenges transform over those years?
Yeah, so I mean, if you think about it, think about what you were taught in school 10 to 15 years ago, and it's a really good indicator of where the industry was. And education tends to lag, right? Syllabuses take a while to adjust. Schools tend to take a while to adjust. And 10 to 15 years ago, we were learning how to use Excel. We were learning how to use R and Stata and very rudimentary analytical tools. And from a data visualization capability perspective, Tableau was maybe just starting to come out and really take over. And a lot of these skill sets weren't even available, to be taught in school. And so people were coming into work, and what they were finding was there weren't coherent data systems or platforms. There weren't coherent technology stacks available for them to use. Everybody was in Excel, right? Think about it. Like even job titles or job descriptions would say, hey, you need expert Python skills, and you come in and you're really just ETLing using CSVs and pulling it into another Excel file, maybe using Power Pivot. Like that was analytics, right? Really 10, 15 years ago. And even at that, if you did that, you were like a god to a degree. Like everybody's like, oh my gosh, look at the skill set this person has. They can automate a bunch of Excel spreadsheets. Where I've seen the industry go though is as kind of education, as skill sets have started to pick up and people are able to drive more innovative solutions, they're able to kind of get out of that Excel and get out of kind of the tools that were available, legacy tools, and they're finding new ways to solve problems. You're now seeing kind of the modern tech stack that people thought would be incredibly popular 5 to 10 years ago actually start to become used, right, in industry and used in business and in your day-to-day process. And so I really do think we're still in the beginning, right? A lot of people kind of come in and say, hey, look, analytics, data, and all this stuff. I really think we're still in the beginning. A lot of organizations have a tremendous amount of technical debt that's been built up over the last 20, 30, 40 years. People are now starting to realize, hey, how do I leverage, these new public clouds, offers or offerings, or how do I leverage, tools like Snowflake? How do I start bringing information and data together so that we can start using some of these analytical platforms and tools? And so as that maturity curve is becoming, is now, getting to a place where there's more advanced skill set that can utilize those tools. we're now starting to see the transformation that everybody's been wanting to do for the last 5 to 10 years actually start, right? And so folks that are now getting into data and analytics have meaningful roles and responsibilities, and they're not just stuck in Excel all day long.
Absolutely. And the technical debt, as we're slowly but surely getting to the end of it, or at least making significant progress, do you see that challenge of disruption from your perspective as a practitioner being technological in nature, or is it something else? Where do you see the bottleneck when you really want to make sure that being data driven becomes not just a buzzword at a company, but really a way of life?
Yeah. So the biggest challenge is adoption and utilization of technology within organizations. And you have to remember, most of the people within a large enterprise corporation company that you work at, most people don't know anything about data and analytics. For most of them, it's scary, right? They don't understand it. They don't know it. They don't want it because it could potentially, automate their jobs, right? Automate their day-to-day activities. And so the challenge is not really technological. If you look at most organizations, most of these cutting-edge technology that's available in the ether, in the environment, is actually affordable. It's not crazy expensive. And so technology usually isn't the limiting factor. It's the people and their ability to adopt. It's the organization and their ability to adopt and change their business processes to start utilizing these technologies. And what you find is, executives at the top of an organization are usually happy, right? They're like, yes, we need to drive technological change. We need to drive digital transformation. We need to, and you see them hiring senior vice presidents of digital transformation, chief data officers, chief analytics officers. Like, they're starting to invest at that level. You see these analysts that come in that are incredibly savvy, that went through school, they understand Python, they know SQL, they have comp sci degrees, they have the skill set to use these tools. But what's kind of stuck in the middle are those folks that have 10 to 15 years of experience that have never used these technologies. They're responsible for the business process, they're business process owners, and their job, their results that are, that they're graded against is execution. And so if you look at what their jobs are, their job is just to get the job done. They don't necessarily care how it gets done, a majority of them. And they may not even have the skill set to understand, how do I leverage this new technology to do it? And that's where the real challenge is, right? It's kind of a squeeze, right? You have your executives coming in from the top, analysts demanding things from the bottom, and you have this middle layer management who's just stuck, and they're just trying to get things done. And for them, change is incredibly hard, right? And so that's where I find, through my experience, the most difficulty is in adoption and onboarding technology and onboarding, data and analytic capabilities within your organization is really within that middle management layer.
Yeah, that's spot on. It keeps coming up in our community touch points as well. One thing that we talk about a lot is this direction of influence. So when you want to implement change, do you go from the top? Do you go from the bottom? Do you do the same? Do you do it at the same time? And from your experience, I mean, what are your best practices of moving the needle in this? So how do you really get through to these individuals in middle management? Because you mentioned that, okay, these people, first of all, they don't understand data analytics, but also a lot of times they're afraid of it. Well, in any kind of influence initiative, when two of the most horrible emotions possible, which is fear and confusion, you're up against that, well, that's like a massive challenge. So you're someone who does have some background in this, which I think we'll talk about, your university background I'm referring to specifically with regards to negotiation. But what were your best practices? What did you find over the years in your career that are really reliable strategies to overcome this resistance?
Yeah, I mean, so a big way to kind of overcome the challenge is you really have to just prove that it's not scary, right? And a lot of people can argue ideologies, they can argue thoughts and project plans, and it's they can argue ideas all day long. But if you present to them a finished good, a widget, a result, something that is an outcome that they can look at, they can touch, they can feel, they can see with their own eyes, they can see that it works, it immediately becomes less scary, right? Because they don't necessarily need to understand the process to get there. And usually it's the process to get there that's scary for them. I have to write this much Python. I had to do this. I had to do this transformation. Here's all the steps I went through. Here's the ELT logic, all that stuff, right? They don't necessarily care about that. And that's where the confusion and scariness comes in. And so what's helped me, right, be successful in my career is say, hey, look, I have an idea. I want to change something. Let me go and actually do a POC, right? A proof of concept. Let me figure out if I can make it work, if I can make something physical, I can make something that's tangible and get it in their hands so that when they see it and they use it and they look at it, they're like, okay, this is not as scary and I can do something with this. I see the value in this. It's no longer a thought exercise. It's a thing that exists, right? And if it exists, they can't necessarily deny its existence, right? Laszlo's here. I can't say Laszlo's not here. He's literally on my screen, right?
Philosophy 101, yeah.
Yeah, philosophy 101. And so there's that piece. And the other piece is really around how you can talk folks, right? So let's say you can't really get to there. And you need to drive adoption for something. You brought up negotiation. In my opinion, every interaction you have with somebody is a strategic negotiation, right? Whether it's somebody... You're talking to your employee in a one-on-one and you're like, hey, how's your day going? That's still technically a negotiation. You're trying to understand what they're doing, what they value, and how you can add to their experience, right, within your organization. Everything has to have a outcome or result to a degree. Even personal engagements, right? You're trying to get something out of it for yourself. They're trying to get something out of it for themselves as well. And so mostly you have to understand as a technical individual, sometimes we see things very logically, right? This is a solution. It's going to save you 5,000 hours. Why aren't you using it? Right. And then we stop there. That's our block. And then we get incredibly angry. We get frustrated. We escalate it. But what we don't sit down and do is understand, okay, who's at the other side of this table? What is incentivizing them to be here? What incentivizes them to be at work? What do they value? And what can I offer that can appeal to their values, but also get, to some degree, what I want done? Now, you may not get 100% of what you're trying to pitch to that person completed. That's fine. But I'd rather get 20, 30, 40, 50% of what I need done than 0%, right? And then understanding what they need and seeing how can I take my solution and appeal to what incentivizes them. And so when I see kind of data leaders, right, and I see folks make that jump from being like an analyst to a leader, it's usually the individuals that can understand how do I look at this engagement with people within my organization, and how do I work towards finding these quote unquote win-win situations. And maybe you win 60%, they win 40%. It doesn't matter, right? At the end of the day, you're trying to find a way to move both of you forward. And I think that's a block for a lot of folks where, again, we see things very logically, and this is a thing that should just work, and why aren't you adopting it? You have to get past that, and you have to understand, okay, what do I have to compromise? What do they have to compromise? And how do we move forward together?
100%. I have a bunch of questions specifically on building solutions that are actually adopted, but let me just linger a little bit on your background in negotiation. So how did you end up studying negotiation at university?
Well, so it was in my master's program, and I found myself to be an incredibly introverted person early in my career, right? And so just in general, I don't like to go and shake people's hands. I don't like to, I just don't, I can't do it. You put me in a room full of people, I'll just get on my phone and sit in a corner. And so I quickly realized that the technical side of work I could figure out, right? Econ degree, stats, all that stuff. I could figure all that pieces out. I can learn to code. I can do all that activities. The piece that I really needed to understand was, how do I approach people? How do I talk to people? And how do I make sure that every engagement I have with a person is somewhat meaningful, right? And through that, I realized, hey, I needed to build up my soft skills. I absolutely needed to build up my soft skills. But I also needed to figure out, how do I get people to buy into what I'm saying? right? How do I get to a place where I can influence individuals to see the world the way I'm trying to see it, or I'm trying to envision it, or I'm this project I'm trying to drive? How do I talk people into seeing things the way I need to see? And for me, it really came down to how do you, and there's no set like way to influence a person, right? There's no like 5 rules, right? I know there's books about influencing people, there's books about negotiations, right? And maybe the FBI has their thing, great. It's really about how do you develop meaningful connections with other people, and how do you understand what incentivizes them to be at the table with you, and then how do you use that as leverage to get what they need and get what you need out of that interaction. And so for me, it was really just about building up my soft skills, because I knew that was going to be a hindrance to me moving forward in my career.
Hmm. And were you already in data analytics at the time when you decided to, okay, I need to develop in this area?
I was, yeah. So kind of a brief background.
Mhm.
My undergraduate studies were in economics. So I have 2 degrees: economics, finance, and Japanese. And then when I graduated from my undergrad, I went into banking. And so I went into kind of risk analysis. And I was a risk analyst for a little bit. And then I really found that, hey, look, I really need to kind of move towards, I love this business intelligence thing. I've been kind of a freelance graphic designer on the side. I've worked with Photoshop since I was 10 or 11 years old. Like, I love this stuff. And so how do I bring in a bit of what I'm passionate about into what I do? And business intelligence seemed like the thing to be in. And the other piece is banking is just, from a technology perspective, horrendous, right? These people are working in DOS, incredibly old data platforms. Like, if I wanted something to do an analysis, it would take IT a week to come back to me with the data that I needed to do any sort of analysis. And so that's when I started teaching myself SQL. I started finding ways to get at data myself, and really learned a bulk of kind of the data and analytics skill set outside of the context of school, really from a professional perspective, and just working and doing and getting things done. And from there, I eventually worked my way into where my career really took off, which was at Intel.
Got it. And then basically, because I think when we met at CDO, I mentioned that book from Chris Voss, who used to be the chief negotiator for the FBI. It's called Never Split the Difference. And I remember I was younger when I first bought that book, and I bought it with the intention of, wow, now I can negotiate, better deals, get better price with the suppliers. And it was so much more, that book. It was exactly what you mentioned, that ultimately it made me see reality in a different way. I came to observe all social interactions as negotiations. Negotiation is one of those words that gets a bad rep. You think about bartering when you think about negotiation, kind of like how when you mention sales, you imagine this, I don't know, like a ready salesperson selling you a used car in the 70s, right?
Yeah.
But it's very different. And when you said that every interaction is a negotiation, well, everyone comes with their own frame of reality. It's kind of like your frame of reference. If you think about the frame through which you look at the world, like how even every painting is framed, right? And every interaction that you have with your coworkers, whether it's your boss, whether it's your employee, you both come in with your own version of reality. And if you can find a common ground, if you can share what's actually objectively true, that allows you to now walk hand in hand. So when you learned all those insights and you think about your hardcore data analytics professional world, and you try to look at the intersection of the two, what would be, you think, the key principles that you found that work, like spectacularly, that are so applicable, any kind of approach to these interactions that you would be able to recommend your fellow practitioners to really keep in mind, maybe kind of like an 80-20 top 3 superpowers or techniques or methods or approaches?
Yeah. Oh wow. I haven't really summed up my
I'm putting you on the
thoughts in like
spot there with a
a approach.
curveball.
But the way that, I mean, and it's kind of cliche to say, you got to think of things from another person's perspective, but you legitimately need to do that when you're, again, negotiating with people and trying to understand, right, what they're doing. I agree with you. I think negotiation, the term, gets an incredibly bad rep. Influencing someone, it kind of feels like you're talking about manipulating people. And I had a joke at Intel, right? Because influencing is really big. at Intel. And what I used to call it is like, hey, let's not think of it as influence. Let's think of it as positive manipulation, because that's what you're trying to do. You're trying to get people to kind of think of things your way. But at the end of the day, you're trying to find, you have to be willing and have to have the perspective that I'm trying to drive something for the both of us. I know this person is not going to agree to something unless they get something out of it. No one's altruistic. No one's that altruistic where they're just going to give you everything. And so you have to come at it from a perspective of, I'm going to do everything I can to find a way for me to get what I need to 100%, but find a way to get them a value statement so that they understand, okay, whatever Vivek is trying to drive, whatever this person's trying to drive, there's a benefit for me here, like a tangible benefit that's going to impact me personally. It's going to impact my professional career. It's going to impact my team positively. And you have to be able to, as a practitioner, convey that message to them. And it's really hard to do because we have our own egos. Again, when you're a technical expert, you feel like you're the expert and you should be the one that's driving the decision or driving the recommendation. But what we often forget is the other person at the other side is an expert in their own domain. And so when we come in and we try to bulldoze them with our idea, they're just going to push back because they feel as though they're an expert in their space as well. So you really have to remove your ego. You really have to remove the sense of, I'm the expert in this situation, and come at it from a perspective of, look, we're both here because this company thought of us, thought of us both highly, right? We're both here because we're somewhat of experts and we're in this job because they thought we could do it well. So let's figure out how I can make this work for the both of us. The other thing I always remember is change is hard, right? The thing that the people, especially in data and analytics, the thing that we're driving the most is usually process efficiency, optimization. We're legitimately going in and changing how people do work. And I don't think a lot of folks really internalize that. They see it as, okay, we're driving solutions. There's this awesome dashboard I built. Awesome. What they don't see is there's 10 analysts that manually put that dashboard together that you just automated. Okay, so when I go pitch it to them and I show them this amazing thing, we don't necessarily sit back and think, well, those 10 analysts aren't thinking this is awesome. What they're thinking is, what about my job? What about all the stuff that I do? And so what we have to realize is, for us, change is difficult. For the organization, change is difficult. For those analysts you're trying to pitch a dashboard to, for the leaders you're trying to pitch an idea to, change is difficult. For me, my understanding of change came when I was like early 20s. I had a ton of hair, Laszlo. Like I had a lot of hair. Like
we all did once.
We all did once. And then when I turned 23, 24, it started going away. And I do what most people do, right? I got Rogaine. I got every single product you could possibly think of to try to get my hair back, because I was like, holy cow, you know what? I'm losing my hair. I got to figure this thing out. Like this was my identity, or so I thought. And it's so like
apocalypse. I tried to the world is collapsing.
Yeah. The world is collapsing. My hair is going. And I thought about it all. I was like, okay, well, do I get plugs? Do I get a toupee? What do I do? Well, I'm going to talk to a doctor, a dermatologist, something. Let me figure out what the problem is. And I fought it for a while until my wife was just like, just shave it off. Who cares? And so I shaved it off, and it felt weird for like a brief period of time. And then I realized, whoa, look, I'm no longer spending like $300-400 a year on haircuts. I'm no longer spending all that money on shampoo and conditioner. I'm no longer spending my time having to go to a barber shop. Like, it's easy. All I have to do, I buy, I shave my head, I buy body lotion, like a body soap, and that's it. It's just one thing. It's all body. And you quickly realize that it's a lot of it's perspective, right? Change comes in many forms. You're the one who perpetuates the change, who drives the change, or change is happening to you. And for me, I quickly realized change was happening to me, right? I have, this thing was occurring. It was out of my control, but I could do two things. I could change my perspective. I could fight the change, and it'd be hard, and I'd probably spend lots of money. I'd probably go somewhere to get plugs, and it probably wouldn't have worked that well because I'm actively losing hair. Or I can embrace the change and find a way to use it to my benefit, save money, and maybe go on vacations with all that money I saved, right? When I talk to folks about change management, I tell them, look, you have to be able to understand that change can happen to you, and how you react to change is important, but you're trying to change somebody else. And so you have to try and ease that change and drive their perspective towards finding the benefit for them, right? Just like I found benefit in not having to go get a haircut, $30, $40 haircut every other week. Find a benefit for them. If you're trying to drive this automated reporting, say, hey, look, analyst 1, analyst 2, analyst 3, you're no longer spending 20 hours over 2 weeks trying to put this thing together. That's 20 hours you get back to go drive an analysis and influence your business partners. Go do that. You're going to have way more success and way more career. Like you didn't go to school to like wrangle data. You went to school to be able to drive insights within the organization. So go do that. I'll do all that, the grunt work for you now, and my team can do that for you so that you can drive insights for your business partners. How do you drive the message so that it's beneficial to the other person? And how do you make sure that you don't succumb to the change and that you use it to your own benefit as well?
Such a great point. And also it's a fantastic example. The hair. I remember that when I went to officer school for boot camp, they do shave your head, right?
Yeah.
And it was a revelation to me because it was just so insanely convenient, right? I'm still nostalgic. Maybe I'll soon return. Maybe I'll soon come home. But
yeah, there you go.
But also now it made me think this whole negotiation scenario. It made me think about like literally every situation. I recently hired two guys, high potential hires, right? And we had a bunch of applicants really here in Vancouver, just an abundance of good talent. But I remember like asking the right questions in these situations to find out where is this person coming from, right? Like what are their motivational levers? So the two sides to that. Of course, I'm looking for the right person. So I will need to be at the end of the day happy with the deal. I know the value that I can provide for them. I know the significance of the opportunity that they have. At the same time, I need to be happy with the deal if we're going to make a deal. So asking the right questions, finding out their real desires, their perspective on life, their goals, and all that. And then, of course, after that, when I'm happy with the deal, the burden is still on me, even though I already know the potential of the opportunity to sell them on that too, right? To paint the right picture and to connect their world, like what they care about. And it might be different for people, even in the same role, to, okay, here's what the future could look like for you, and speak to that in a way that will resonate with them. Because otherwise I'm actually shortchanging them, right? I don't really manage to like paint that vision that would allow them to like boldly step into that opportunity. And I can see the relevance for you guys in data analytics too, right? Because like I think we talked about philosophy. There's a philosopher I really like, Jason Silva, and he has these philosophical espresso shots when he just like riffs on certain themes. And he has one just called The Anatomy of a Leader. And he talks about how like a good leader kind of presents an alternate version of reality. And sometimes it can even be viewed as you said, like manipulation, trying to influence someone, I mean, manipulate their worldview. But at the moment when you get someone to adopt that vision of truth, it becomes truth, right? It's like a vision of truth of the future, what could be the potentiality. So for you, like on those two sides, first of all, like selling something, but more importantly, even asking the right questions. So you mentioned adoption, and it came up multiple times in the conversation. So how do you make sure that you're actually building the right solutions for the right people at the right time? Do you have some go-to questions that you like to ask when you approach your stakeholders to make sure that you connect to those key motivational levers, that you will push the right buttons, that you actually don't build something that will be just thrown in the bin because no one cares? So do you have a strategy when you're trying to build these relationships and ask the right questions?
One thing comes to mind when you talked about like employees, because as a organizational leader, the one thing that I'm always cognizant about is how do I take transactional relationships and make them more connective, right? How do we go from having transactional interactions with people to having like real meaningful connected kind of interactions with individuals? And I actually tried to drive that with my key stakeholders as well, right? And so it's exhausting. I will 100% tell you it is absolutely exhausting to connect with people on a personal level across the board. because you yourself have to put yourself out there. You yourself have to work towards building a really strong relationship with them, whether it's people on your team and whether it's people out there, stakeholders, your own leadership. It's hard. And that's one thing that people don't really tell you about becoming a manager or becoming a leader, is that that's probably the most difficult part of it, is creating those relationships. And so when I'm working on building those relationships with stakeholders, like I spend a tremendous amount of time initially getting to know them, just not in a work context, just in any context. Who are you as a person, right? If I'm trying to connect with Laszlo as my stakeholder, I'll say, where's Laszlo from? How do you work? What do you do? Trying to really get kind of this mutual understanding of who we are as people, so that when I get to the questions, the real questions, instead of just directing me towards kind of adjacent problems that exist, they'll actually show me the real problem that exists within their organization that they really need help with. That, you know, they to some degrees in a lot of enterprises or companies, they'll actually hide, because it provides them job security, or it is just embarrassing to a degree, and they don't want to put a spotlight on it, right? And that's just kind of the political nature of work. But if you're able to create meaningful relationships, friendly relationships with people, then you can get into conversations about, hey, look, Laszlo, what's really happening within your organization? Like, what are the biggest challenges that you have, the biggest pain points? What keeps you up at night? That, you know, if it wasn't there, that problem wasn't there any longer, your day would just be infinitely better. And people are willing to open up and tell you about things that keep, like, for me, it's for this leader, for Laszlo, it's understanding, again, what concerns him so much, or concerns this person so much, that it spills into keeping them up at night, right, to a degree. And when you start asking questions that have an incredible amount of weight behind them, people start thinking about it and say, you know what, this one system issue, right? I have this one person, and they run this one job, and if that job fails, we can't run our financials for the day. And if we can't do that, we lose an entire day's worth of work. And this one person is a single point of failure, right? You understand that's what keeps them up at night. Now I know, okay, based off that information, I know exactly where to go and how to address the concerns that this person has. It becomes a negotiation, because now I can say, hey, look, I know that's a big problem in your life. I'm going to go and do whatever I can to automate that issue and make that system process better, whether it's business process enhancement, whether it's, you know, bringing an application or data engineering activities to get you a report, whatever it might be. I'm going to make that better so that you don't have these concerns. And you immediately turn it around saying, hey, we're going to drive a solution using data and analytics, maybe RPA, RDA. They, on the other hand, think of it as a solution that's going to make their life, quality of life at work, better. And so that's really kind of how, it's a long-winded, I don't have two or three things, but that's kind of how I approach, right, these type of interactions with folks. Is you have to get to a place where they can trust you to tell you really what's plaguing them, what really bothers them, so that you can create that value proposition that kind of hits them at an incredibly deep level, so that they're willing to adopt the solution at the end of the day as well. Because they have that relationship with you, and they want to do whatever they can to help you be successful as well. It's mutual success. And that's really what you're trying to get to at the end of the day.
No, this is so good. Also, it made me think about, first of all, you mentioned that, especially in big corporates, it does happen oftentimes that people are hiding, and sometimes unknowingly, they don't even know that they are hiding. It's just kind of a habit that they have. And on the flip side of that, what I found over the years, that when you manage to ask the right questions, that ability in and of itself becomes a service that you can extend to that person. So just to give you an example, one of our community members, an FD 500 company, and they had this like massive event in the headquarters, and they were responsible, like our community members, to talk about data analytics, to inform and to really bring something interesting about data analytics into that event. It was focusing on marketing, right? And they sent me an email and they said, hey guys, you do this podcast, can you just come in, you know, to the headquarters and just talk about data analytics? And I remember that I was like, okay, absolutely, like we're open to that, but let's jump on a call, find out whether it would be the right fit. And the most fundamental questions, even as we started to dig in, for example, we hit that question of, okay, what do you guys actually want to get from this, right? And even that was like, wait a second, like in this whole like stream of, okay, we need to do an event, we need to invite speakers, we haven't even thought about what we want to achieve from this. So in and of itself, of getting to that, of wait, we actually want to make the marketing team more excited about data analytics. That's actually what we're looking for, right? So we're not looking for the technical stuff. It's more about excitement. And now immediately that gave them the insight that what's actually missing right now for us, even on a more strategic level, is that people are not really excited about data analytics, right? This is just a small example. But then over time, what I found that when you manage to be like an insightful person to interact with them, people have these revelations, these, you know, small epiphanies. Suddenly now you are positioned as what you mentioned, the trusted advisor. It's like I get value from the interactions from this person, even when there's no transaction taking place. Right. And when it comes to you proposing something, suddenly you're just a much more significant person in their world, in their universe, right? They will prioritize whatever you propose and come forth with. Now, so this is asking the right questions. Quick question on, and this is more like for, I guess, more in the data analytics professional part of how do you identify the right opportunities? So obviously that's also like an interesting endeavor in and of itself. Or do you have a best practice on identifying the right people to approach with analytics in the business to get the low hanging fruit, the you know, the easy wins, maybe find some champions inside the business? Do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah. So, I mean, there's multiple. So there's usually when I talk to and mentor folks. So I went to undergrad at the University of Oregon, and I go back and I mentor students there. And when they're getting into their professional careers, and they always ask, how do I use this? Because everybody wants Python skills, everybody wants SQL skills, but I can't come in with 1 to 3 years of like experience. I'm graduating from college. Not just that, there's people that are in entry-level jobs where, you know, how we talked about earlier, where, you know, they're doing data jobs or they're doing analyst jobs, but they're all in Excel all day long. And they want to become data and analytic professionals, right? Practitioners, whether it's a BI analyst, a data engineer, something, right? They want to be something in the future. How do I do it? What I usually tell them is, even if there's not an opportunity that's handed to you, just look around you. There's inefficient processes everywhere, literally everywhere. Even the most high-tech companies, Google, Meta, and all these companies that are out there, the Tesla, whatever, they have, I can guarantee they have tremendous amount of inefficiencies. There's not a single organization that has their business processes 100% documented down to a T, that is as efficient as it possibly can be, because the technological landscape is constantly shifting and changing. What was efficient 10 years ago is no longer efficient today. And so find what you can optimize and what you can drive using some level of data and analytics, whether it's automation using some sort of RDA technology, whether it's using Python to drive an analysis you would have done in Excel. Like, find different ways to use these skill sets and flex them, right? Because that's how you're going to get better. That's how you're going to be able to drive these skills. Now, when I'm looking at opportunities for me professionally, it's just been doing that, right? Anytime I've taken a job, now don't tell my previous managers, I would try to automate as much of those jobs as I possibly could. And on average, I would probably automate 60 to 70% of the manual activities. I just could do it, right? I would use some sort of, there's tons of RDA tech out there. Most people have Windows-based computers. You can use, Power Automate. It's free for your computer, right? On your local PC. Automate things. I taught myself SQL, taught myself Python, taught myself ways to use this technology to my benefit so that I wouldn't have to do some of the manual activities. And I would spend the rest of that time that I would save, I would spend on finding opportunities or going out and building these POCs, solutions that are beyond the scope of my normal role. And I would find literally anybody that was willing to listen. And so, like a good example is at Intel, I was brought in to be a consolidator, right, for the data center group, financial consolidator. And so I would work with all the financial analysts. I would consolidate up their financials, and I would give it to our controllers, and they'd go off and do the presentations. That was an incredibly manual activity. Tons of finance analysts that I was consolidating things together for. And so, a colleague of mine, the other thing is find good people to work with. Like, you can't do it yourself all the time. And so I had a colleague, a friend, his name was Jeremy. And he had gone off in a very similar manner and built, using SQL, pulled together a bunch of financial information that we would have done during, with these consolidations, and built a cube, a very easy cube using Power Pivot and Excel, because we didn't have the technology to deploy anything. And we said, this thing is amazing, right? So him and I worked to even make it even bigger, make it more analysis focused. And we went and shopped it with whoever we could. We then took it out of our data center team and said, hey, all these other teams that have similar teams to ours, just use this thing free. I don't care. Just use it. And they said, wow, we can? Oh, yeah, sure. And we started automating, and we got to like a few 100,000 hours of time savings amongst these finance analysts. And people started looking and saying, whoa, so you're telling me if we could document our processes, document where the data comes from, use a little bit of SQL, pull the data out of where these analysts are getting from anyways, and build the logic into these models, we could be successful? We said, absolutely. And so what they did was we quickly found, gaps from a leadership perspective. And I said, hey, look, there's not really a manager that's driving this strategy across Intel. So let's figure that out. And then I quickly saw we don't have a visualization platform. So I went and talked to Microsoft and just released Power BI. And I said, you know what? I want to use Power BI. And we were a big consumer of Microsoft goods at Intel. And so they let us have Power BI. And I work with our India teams in IT. I work with our GM of enterprise applications in IT. And this is all beyond the scope of my normal role. FYI, I'm just a finance guy. And I got Power BI Cloud implemented across Intel as an enterprise. Me, junior analyst, getting a data visualization platform in 2016 implemented across the organization. And that very quickly, like, again, it's just me finding things. I didn't care if I was getting paid to do it. I didn't care if I was getting the promotions. I didn't care if I was getting for me, it was fun. And I was doing things that I knew was moving the organization forward. And as soon as leaders started seeing these activities happening and seeing me working some of these activities, they said, whoa, okay, we need to have this person be in a more leadership role to drive even more of these type of activities. And so one manager took a risk, brought me in as a senior leader. I started driving more technological and modernization type projects. And they said, here's 3 heads, figure it out. And we were able to turn 3 heads from 3 people to about 33 people when I left over the span of 2 years, all self-funded, all funded based on the time savings, cash savings that we had. So for me, again, it wasn't about people landing opportunities in my plate. It was, I see problems. I'm going to go solve those problems. It's beyond the scope of my role. I don't care. I'm going to just go and do it and go talk to whoever wants to listen, get to the right people, get to the right decision makers, show them the POC, show them the result. They can't argue against it. And the results were really what drove success for me in my career at the end of the day, not asking for it. I've never asked for a promotion. I've only gone out and done the solutions, and all that other stuff just kind of comes with it.
Exactly. So true. So it's like basically being proactive, and then once you choose a few opportunities, then just like really capitalizing on those principles of asking the right questions, engaging the right people, painting the right vision, really just focusing on 80-20. I mean, you don't need to become like a Wall Street level, salesperson, negotiator, whatever. And then, as you said, and that I really like that then things just start to happen for you. You don't need to ask for anything. Yeah. It will be just kind of opened up for you, and you will have this abundance of opportunity. And I'm trying to be also respectful of your time. I know that we're coming up against the clock, but with this, so we talked about negotiation, we talked about your best practices in identifying the right opportunities. Now we are the data storytellers. So I'll be just interested in hearing your thoughts on storytelling in general. Is it something that you think about? How important do you think storytelling is for data analytics professionals? It's an intentionally open-ended question this time, so swing away if you have any thoughts.
Yeah, yes, I have thoughts on storytelling. Most dashboards are terrible. because like you said, they don't tell a coherent story. What we're taught sometimes as analysts is to get data and get information and just jam it into a PowerPoint. I'm not even going to talk about Power BI or Tableau. Like look at most PowerPoints that have data points on them. And when people go in, data practitioners, analytics, business intelligence analysts, they get in, they just build these reports. A lot of the times, they're just putting a bunch of stuff on a page and saying, "Look at this pretty thing I built with all this data." They don't necessarily understand how the end user needs to interact with it. And so working to be able to tell a coherent story is way more important than having the technology to tell it. And so when I'm hiring business intelligence analysts or reporting analysts, I care more, do they fundamentally understand behavioral psychology? Do they understand how people internalize colors? Like, we can't have more than 3 colors on a report because you're just gonna overwhelm the end user. Do they understand how to talk to the person they're building the report for and understand the logic behind how they would use the report so that they can craft it in a way that tells like a story, that tells it in a way that is meaningful? More often than not, we just go mine data and we put it in front of folks and hope something happens. The skill set that is required to be able to tell stories, to me, is not a data and analytics skill set, right? It's your ability to communicate that is way more important than the other stuff. One of the most successful people on our teams that built the best reports, she was a journalist. Like, she was a journalism major, right? And then she got a math degree. But it was the journalism part that made her incredibly, incredibly amazing, because she could go out and ask the best questions and really understand what is it that this person needs, so that I can craft a story that works for them. Not just craft it, not just put a bunch of pie charts, right? Most people put a bunch of pie. Every time I see a pie chart in a report, I immediately dismiss the report, unless that pie chart has 2 elements, at most 3 elements. Because anything more than that, I'm just trying to figure out how big the slices are. Like, it's wasted time, and an executive doesn't have that much time to waste. And so I need somebody to understand the theory behind how visuals are interpreted, how colors are interpreted. I need them to understand, if we're presenting something to our leadership in Israel or Southeast Asia, maybe put the most important things in the top right corner, because they read right to left, not left to right. Like, I need somebody that can understand that stuff. And so when I'm looking at what storytelling means to me, within the context of data and analytics, it's really, does a person have the capacity to join kind of the psychology aspect of, internalizing information, and the technical skills, the being able to actually do the report building. And it's hard to find people that can do both. And so at times we hire on one or the other extreme and try to upskill them to get them to the middle, right? So I'll hire somebody that has the incredibly good graphic design experience, that has the really good psychology experience, they've read, Stephen Few, all these folks, right? They've read the books that tell you how to build good visuals, and we teach them how to use a data visualization tool. Or we go the other way, somebody that's an expert in data visualization tools, or tools plural, right? If you have Power BI on your report, I don't care. On your resume, sorry. If you have Tableau on your resume, I don't care, right? I'm tool agnostic. You should be tool agnostic too. It's going to change. Do you have the capacity to understand how people internalize visualization, so that you can take your skill set and move it tool agnostic? That's the most important part to me when it comes to storytelling. I don't know if that answers your question. It made me go on a rant.
Absolutely. intentionally so.
Yeah.
And no, absolutely. And ultimately, that's what our community is built on, is this whole idea of complementary skills. That's actually our hill to die on. And we actually didn't come up with the concept. Really, you guys who identified this idea, that the ultimate force multiplier, to make sure that, all this money and effort that organizations invest into data and analytics, and you have the PhDs, earning high salaries, to make sure that whatever they build, they will reach the target audience and will actually have an impact and translate into real business value. The bottleneck is that. The bottleneck is the soft skills, the complementary skills, the ability to tell the story, the ability to map all this fantastic, beautiful, rapidly growing, technological, innovative stuff and translate it into a human language that will resonate with people. So I think that's a great note to finish on. I really appreciate your time, Vivek. This was a really good conversation. And well, we hope to collaborate with you in our community moving forward.
Thank you. Yeah, I appreciate you having me, and anytime. Happy to be here.